Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mack, John McMullen. John, how you doing on this Football Friday? Short week for us, brother, but the Birds got out on the football field this week for OTAs. How you feeling this morning, John?
Gloomy, because it's always evidently the sun is never coming out locally, but other than that, seasonal, what do they call it? Seasonal affective disorder? I don't know, but be nice to see some nice weather. Hopefully we get it next week. Hopefully we'll likely be back in there Tuesday, and hopefully it'll be outside. So we'll see if the weather can give us a break next week. But positive to see that, if you think about it, that's raising the curtain on the 2025 Eagles. That first OTA practice open to reporters. So
right.
From that standpoint, always good to get the first look.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like much surprised us, John, from that first open curtain reveal, as you put it. Sometimes when there's a curtain drop or a curtain raise, or whatever you want to put it, there's a surprise. Not many surprises so far with this team. I think most of the stuff is business as usual.
Yeah, well, it's a very good team. I mean, it starts there. There's not a lot of questions, certainly on the offensive side of the football. Really only one from the standpoint of the starting lineup. After they work things out with Dallas Goedert. Defensively, a lot more questions, but we know, Nick Sirianni's been around long enough now that we know the way he thinks and the way the organization thinks in this era. And they're going to make the younger players prove it. So there's little things like Andrew Makuba getting significant first team snaps, even though Reed Blankenship wasn't there, he wouldn't have. But, you could tell they were trying to get him up to speed as quickly as possible for a potential role early in the season. Adoree Jackson starting in front of Kelee Ringo. A little bit of surprise only because he's the veteran, yes, but he hasn't been here. And Kelee Ringo has been here for 2 seasons. So that was a little bit of a surprise to me. And then the Bryce Huff situation with June 1st coming up, we'll see what happens there. But a little bit of a surprise that he has not been at voluntary work whatsoever, which is not a positive sign, or it is, depending on a lot of Eagles fans think. I don't think they're thinking about the business end, but
from a business perspective, it's definitely not a positive sign. And the last 2 things with Bryce Huff, it was take a seat for the Super Bowl. We won't need you, and don't show up at OTAs. We don't want you permeating in the building. It's not looking good for Bryce Huff right now.
No, I don't know if that latter part is correct. But, you would think from his perspective, you would think it would be an opportunity to say, all right, the first year didn't work out, but, I'm going to prove myself. And, it could be just from one side. It could be two-sided. We don't know yet, but it's not a positive either way from the standpoint of him being here and being a contributor. He might be hidden away because of the cap ramifications, like James Bradbury last year, but not a positive. And as a younger player, I wouldn't advocate that for Bryce Huff. I mean, he's still a very young player, whereas James Bradbury's near the end of his career, hasn't signed anywhere yet. Who knows? Maybe he is at the end of his career. A little bit different for Bryce Huff. I would have advised him to put his head down and go to work, but
he's only 27, John, just turned 27.
Yeah, exactly. So, he's not going to stop playing. So, I don't think it's a positive development.
What's your feeling right now? You feel like Bryce Huff's going to be traded, cut, moved, stashed on the roster? Eat your pride if you're Howie. What's your gut feeling right now on Bryce Huff?
Well, I don't know how you trade him.
I was looking at the numbers after Ed brought that up yesterday. They're not great for the Eagles moving on from him.
No, No, that's when we
terrible.
talked about voidable years earlier in the week because of Roger Goodell's comments out at the spring meeting being interpreted a certain way. This is the downside. This is the wrong side of the evaluation. When you sign somebody to significant money and you tack on all the voidable years and they don't work out, it ain't good. So if that happens more often, the Eagles have to rethink their own philosophy. But luckily, they've had a very good batting average with doing it. This one doesn't look like it's going to work out. So trade would be the best case scenario for the Eagles. And I always say there's a lot of bad GMs out there, but are they that bad?
Right.
Know where you are with them. And like I said, he's going to keep playing. Somebody's going to give him a second opportunity, but they're not going to sign him to that contract. You're picking up that contract if you trade for him.
Now you think there's a chance the Eagles could like eat half of it or something, and then you have a chance where if you do that, another GM might do it because you're going to give up a seventh or something. You know what I mean? It's very low risk, and you get a guy who potentially has one trick pony ability where it hasn't worked out in Philly.
Teams who do that are usually looking for assets. The Eagles already have a crap load of draft picks. They don't need another 7th round pick. So typically they don't do business that way. They're not going to pay people to play somewhere else. So I would say from both of those standpoints, I wouldn't expect it. Would be out of character. And again, you're not those sort of NBA, Major League Baseball like deals. You're essentially trying to pay money for an asset, and usually that asset is more significant than a 7th round pick.
Right.
So I don't see the fit there either. Sometimes you just strike out and you got to accept it. But Howie's also. He's not, as he said, when he talked about stubbornness and to see how this is shaken out, the stubbornness is more about that, what I said, paying somebody to go play somewhere else or, just doing that, the Bradbury sort of path indicates they might just stash him away somewhere. But if I'm Bryce Huff and I'm his agent, I'm like, just what he's 27 years old. Can he afford to waste the season of his career? So it's going to be interesting to see how it works out. But ultimately, I think from the Eagles' perspective, if they're going to move on, they got to cut him. They got to cut him and take the medicine.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to do that. I don't feel like they're going to do that, but we'll see what ends up happening here. John, this brings up another point another question in my head that I'm thinking about here. Do you feel like this? And maybe it's not at all. Maybe you completely dispute it, but Bryce Huff, as you and Ed talked about nicely yesterday, where he's a one-trick guy. Like let him go and do the one trick, right? And they don't seem to do that. But if you look at some of the acquisitions that this team has made on defense, if you look at the guys they've paid recently in Zach Bond, you look at Cooper DeJean, you look at who they drafted in Jahad Campbell. Do you think they're trying to get to more of a positionless player-filled defense where they have guys that are more versatile, can move around a little bit more? And it seems like the thing that they like the most, John, is they can play 3 downs. If they don't play 3 downs, outside of Jordan Davis, there's no one on the team last year that couldn't play 3 downs. And I wonder if they're just going that direction. And that's why even if Bryce has that one trick, it's not the player that Vic wants on the edge.
Yeah, well, I think everybody's looking for that league wide, but it's more back 7 than front than the front 4 or the front 5, depending on where you are with the Eagles. But
right.
That's more the linebackers, defensive backs, secondary guys, as far as the versatile chess pieces. Now, where Vic is a little bit more, liberal than most is with those edge defenders, Jahad Campbell, Zach Bond, their ability to rush the passer, along with coverage and flat defender. That's what he wants, and maybe it works out more with JAKIB Campbell when he gets healthy. But I got to tell you, I mean, there aren't a lot of guys who can drop in coverage and play the edge in the NFL.
Yeah, but just 3 downs, like if Bryce can't be out there for 3 downs, like think about Josh Sweat last year, No, he's not an elite edge rusher. He doesn't do anything incredible, but he did everything well. Stopped the run well, played 3 downs
he
well,
doesn't
did
play
everything he
coverage.
needed to
I
do.
would say, you go all the way back to Hassan Reddick, and people lost their minds when Jonathan Gannon, who was playing Vic Fangio's scheme, dropped him into coverage.
Yeah, I remember that.
Wasn't good at it. But and Jonathan would push back, and he said he's never dropped into coverage less in his career. Now, earlier in his career, he was a linebacker, so all-ball linebacker, but which was true from a number standpoint. He never dropped less, and he had his best season. But he did drop. Josh Sweat dropped last year, and people didn't like it because he ain't good at it. It's funny, and Ed and I were talking about overreactions. The first snap, Azeez Ojulari was asked to drop, and he looked like a fish out of water. I mean, it ain't easy for those guys, and it is more of a changeup. It's not like Vic's mentality is go cover this back out of the backfield. No, you're trying to fool the quarterback. It's the old Dom Capers zone blitz. You're trying to, essentially rush one guy you don't expect and drop another guy you do expect to come, and you hope to fool the quarterback. That's the whole philosophy. Right. But yeah, who do people expect to be? You're going to be incensed when Azeez Ojulari drops or Josh Uche drops. I'm talking fans. I mean, it's more of a change up. So I'm like, that's where I very rarely disagree with Vic, but in this instance, I'd be like, yeah, I don't have any problem having a designated pass rusher. And if you want to drop him, if you want to use him as a flat defender on occasion as that changeup, well, you just suck it up and say, all right, the quarterback figures it out. The quarterback figures it out, or take it out of the playbook, whatever you have to do. Now, if you can get Andrew Van Ginkel, or if JAKIB Campbell turns in to Andrew Van Ginkel, great. Then it's great. But
that still is a little pie in the sky, especially year one.
Yeah, but it even if it happens year 2, year 3, phenomenal. But it's not common. So to me, it's like, now the run support part of it is probably the bigger issue.
Yeah, I agree.
But again, what do you think you're getting from setting? You think Ojulari setting the edge like Josh Sweat? You think?
No, but I think Nolan Smith did it well, and I think Josh Sweat did it well last year. Boy, the more we talk about Josh Sweat, the more I'm wondering. I know you weren't paying Milton 27, but should they have just brought back Josh Sweat at this point?
They can't. I mean, they don't. They have too many good players, like we said. With and when people start talking about cap space and because they're going to get caps, they're going to get Darius Slay's cap space. The post June 1st guys, James Bradbury, are the 2 post June 1st designations. So their cap hits were carried this entire time, and they're going to get that relief on June 2nd, which is like 6.4 million. But even that, people don't understand. So there's a rule, the offseason rule, it's called the top 51 rule. Only the top 51 paid players on your roster count against the salary cap in the offseason. That's how you can't keep 90 guys under. Right. So the top 51. So what most people don't calculate in, Slay and Bradbury are in the top 51. So they drop off. That means the next 2 that are out, which in the Eagles' case is Moro Jomo and Anaya Smith, they will be moving up to the top 51. They make just over $1 million each. So 2.07 million So that's 6.2 million of space minus 2.07 million. So I think a lot of people miss that.
Right.
You have to look at both ends and then calculate it. But then the second part is, like, the assumption is the salary cap is always about now, always about now, always about now. And Eagles fans should know better by now. It's not about it's not about making space to get a player. It could be about Jalen Carter next year. It could be about Nolan Smith next year. It could be about Quinyon Mitchell 2 years down
Right.
the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding me?
Um,
Quinyon and
so
Cooper are going to come up at the same time.
so it's not always, it's a much bigger picture that Howie and Bryce Johnson deal with, and it's usually 3 years, a 3-year sort of conglomeration. And not that, again, if guys falter and they get through this portion of the off season and they say Makuba's not ready and Sidney Brown's not good enough, and they say the edges aren't good enough, they might have to go outside the organization and get somebody, but they're not specifically creating space for that.
What's your feeling on when the stuff we talked about earlier this week with the cap that the NFL is talking about with getting or handling void years differently? What's your feeling on when that will come into effect and start to impact the Eagles?
Oh, it might never come into effect. I mean, that's just that's what the NFL, that's what the owners want, and that's collective bargaining with the union, and they will talk about that when they open up negotiations for the 18-game schedule. All of that will come up and be involved with the negotiations, the discussions, but there's no guarantee that, because the whole point of the owners is salaries. The salaries have spiked to the point where they're uncomfortable.
It might be unsustainable too. I mean, 5 years ago, Carson Wentz was the highest paid player at 32. Now we're at 60. I mean, we've doubled from 32 to 60.
But also the cap keeps going up. I mean, it's now they have been undisciplined with part of it, and that's what they want to reel it in and become a little bit more disciplined. But obviously, the union's going to fight in the opposite direction, and they're the ones giving up something for the 18th game, so they're going to fight tooth and nail to keep salaries up. So there's no guarantee it's going anywhere. But I do think the voidable year aspect of it is sort of what maybe the union won't care about because it doesn't affect them as long as they can keep salaries. And if that's the case, then it becomes much more difficult to manage the cap. And then it changes. But the Eagles, if you're smart, you're smart.
And but I still feel like they're going to do what they can to level the playing field, even if it's not, even if what we've done isn't unfair, it's just good business. I still feel like they're going to try and even the playing field.
Well, they're trying to even the playing field for the owners who can't, don't have the financial wherewithal to do that.
Right.
And if they get it accomplished, it will change things. Yes. And the Eagles will have to do things a different way, but they're smarter than everybody now for the most part. Couple people are in the conversation, but and they'll be smarter than same thing with Vic Fangio being a good coach before he won the Super Bowl, being a good coach after he won the Super Bowl.
Right.
They're the smartest before, they'll be the smartest after. That won't change. Just the way business is done will change. And if that even happens again, but it's a negotiation with the union, which obviously wants salaries to stay where they are. And to be honest, they want to grow them because they're playing an extra game. So that's a tough road to hoe for the owners.
Listen, I mean, I get that they'll still be the smartest team, but it is going to affect them a lot more than other teams. I mean, you pointed out how much
they use it more.
Yeah, they use it a lot more, right? I mean, you give 10 people an advantage, John, in anything, and one guy figures out how to use it double, anybody else, and then you take that advantage away, it affects that guy the most. So I think the Eagles are going to be affected the most by it, but we'll see how it all shakes out with that.
Well, the only pushback I'd have to that is the Eagles have a bunch of good players. Like they don't do it just to do it. Like they do it with their good.
Yeah, but can they get that many good players if they weren't able to do what they do with the void years? Like right now, they have Devontae, AJ, Saquon, 4 offensive linemen who are Pro Bowl, Jalen Hurts. Like, can they get all those players in the room on the team at the same time if they don't have the rules that allowed them to do that up to this point?
Probably not, but, already it's affecting them, and they do have the rules to where they're losing good players. That's the nature of the NFL. And at some point, because it is cyclical, when guys age out or start descending, you're not always going to have this many good players. So part of it, unfortunately, will take care of itself, just because of the nature of the industry. But they've already, as you said, they've already lost Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and Darius Slay because they couldn't pay them. Basically, right. That's what it comes down to. And that's with the current incarnation. They have too many good players. Like this is not a concern for most teams because they're not worried about paying that many good players because they don't have that many good players. They have too many good players. Which is a nice problem.
Which is part of the reason that it's going to affect the Eagles more because they have so many damn good players who need to get paid money. And if you get rid of some of those cap rules, or
it might hurt you.
The strings,
a Saquon Barkley type situation where you go out of the organization, it might hurt you there in free agency. Look, if you draft good players, continue, and again, we've talked about the odds of that continuing. At some point, the odds are going to catch up to you. I don't know when, I don't know where, but at times, and you've already seen it this year. I mean, they didn't sign any free agents other to even a 2-year deal. Everything's 1 year. Everything's Temu. It already started, so I don't think it's going to be that dramatic of a shift if it happens. If it even happens, and it might not even happen. But I do know they want to get the void years. Again, it's gone from $40 million in 2013 to $2.2 billion. I think they want to get that. And remember, the Eagles are a large portion of that, just under $400 million. But guess what? That's $1.8 billion that isn't the Eagles. They want to get it under control from an entire league process.
Definitely from a league standpoint, but the Eagles are eating up a big portion of that, which is still notable for sure. But I hear what you're saying, Johnny. Matt, good stuff there. Well, we got plenty to talk about here with the OTAs kicking off this week. The other thing that's on the docket here, John, coming up this weekend is June 1st. All right, the June 1st is, I believe, Sunday is June 1st. So that's a big day in the NFL where people wait to make moves or contract ramifications or implications change for certain players, really for every player. But anything to look out for? Anything on your mind as June 1st is right on the horizon here, John?
Well, I just mentioned they're going to get some cap space with Slay and Bradbury. They're post June 1st designations, so that's been carried this entire time. Their cap numbers, which for Slay is pretty significant, $13.765 million. Bradbury was $5.195 million. Now, the Eagles aren't getting all of that because of the contract and the void years and all that kind of stuff. They're getting 4.324 back for Slay, 2.1 for Bradbury. So again, about 6.4, but then you go down to the bottom of the top 51. They drop out. That means 2 pop in, and that's Moro Ajomo, who makes $1.049 million. And Nia Smith, who makes $1.043 million. They're next. So $6.4 million minus that $2.08 million is the space they gain. They already worked things out with Dallas Goedert, so you don't have to worry about that. Bryce Huff would be the only player. Some implications. And look, there's no good scenario from a business perspective for the Eagles with Bryce Huff. That's what happens when you miss
right
on a player. There's no good scenario. Question is, do they want to eat the money right away? Trade, you can talk about it, and hey, maybe there's some dumb team out there. I don't know. But remember, if they trade for him, they're picking up his contract. So you're not going to get anything. And even if the Eagles pick up part of the contract, which again is not their way of typically doing business, more of an NBA sort of salary dump, you generally only do that for more significant assets. It's not going to be significant either way. And the cut post June 1st, you lose $12.364 million of cap space. So you talk about gaining that $4 million. Well, you lose $12 million plus if you just cut Bryce Huff.
So. Not good there. And you think they add a player? You think they go veteran edge rusher? You think they improve the room that Johnny Mac's been concerned about all offseason? What do you think they do at June 1? Or maybe nothing at all?
I find it hard to believe they were going into the season with Nolan Smith and Azeez Ojulari, Jelix Hunt as their top edge rushers. I still find it hard to believe. So it wouldn't surprise me if they go outside the organization there. Safety, it's more about, Makuba and Sidney Brown. I think they'll give them legitimate chances. But Vic makes decisions quickly. If he says they're not ready, then maybe they have to go outside the organization there.
Going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. June 1, right around the corner. OTAs kicked off this week. Plenty of conversation here about the Philadelphia Eagles. I got a bunch of questions. We got 2 super chats we'll get to, and then we'll get to our first commercial break. And then when we come back, it's time to dive in. Biggest winner of OTAs, concerning absences, all sorts of different things to talk about when it comes to the OTAs that kicked off this week. JD3 checks in. What's up, JD3? Appreciate it, brother. He says, Huff robbed Lurie out of $50 million and got a Super Bowl ring. We should be able to delegate that money to players who show up. Disappointment from week 1. That's not how the business works, JD3.
That's not how it works, JD. Sorry. If it's in butts for candy and nuts, what does this say? I mean, that's you misevaluate on a player. You spend a lot of money. You got to pay the price. The Eagles are out. That's how it works.
If every team could just not give the money to the players that don't work out, man, there'd be a lot of unhappy people in this league, and it wouldn't quite work so well. Fredo checks in. What's up, Fredo? Johnny Mac has swagger like Vic Fangio. Look at that, John. That's a big compliment right there, man.
Yeah, thank you. It comes with no, I don't have but big swagger. I can talk about big swagger. It comes from confidence in what he's doing. So, like, Vic doesn't give a rat's ass what anybody else thinks, because he believes in what he's doing. He knows what he's doing, and that's when it comes to when a subject, you have confidence in the subject. Basically.
No doubt. And Vic's got swag. Johnny Mac's got swag. Appreciate the super chat, Fredo. Vic, good stuff there. Plenty of stuff to talk about here on the OTAs. I thought we got into some good stuff there. When we come back, I do want to talk about Jelix Hunt as well. Big expectations for Jelix Hunt this year. I think we need him to, based on the way the edge rusher room looks right now. So we'll talk about him. Plenty of other conversations, or plenty of other topics when we get back. We got an opened up show. So in hour number 2, for any of you guys who have chats, super chats, questions, comments, concerns on the Philadelphia Eagles, or questions about OTAs, if you put them in the chat, we will take some of those questions in hour number 2. So appreciate all of you guys being here. Hit that like button here on Birds 365. We'll be right back in 3 minutes.
The following is a real